Hello, everybody, and welcome back to SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom. In the last part, we finished out basically all of downtown. There is one spatula that you do have to backtrack in order to get, but thankfully, since you can warp in this game, it really isn't that big of a deal. There is some backtracking in this game, but it never really bothered me like some other games do. Like, for example, I'm playing Spyro 2 right now because of the Reignited trilogy. And the backtracking in that game kind of bothered me because it just sort of felt a little haphazard. But it never bothered me so much in this. Maybe it's just
That's why you moved. That's why you use the move code in
that's
Spyro 2.
cheating. I mean, granted, you can also cheat in this game too and unlock all the power-ups. So it really is no problem at all. You can cheat to get basically an infinite amount of the currency, the shiny objects. You can also cheat to get 100 spatulas immediately, and then you can get the other 100, and that's called a 200% playthrough. But I'm not bothering with that. That guy, you see, that needs to be the new Fortnite dance. That guy's little jig right there.
The shimmy.
Yeah. Oh man, way to rain on that guy's parade. That
It
was a
always
used condom.
it makes me laugh that there's a thundercloud underwater on two levels because the lightning and the water really shouldn't mix, but also because clouds are just water.
Yes.
So
There's also waterfalls and pools of water. to
no,
the
it's
left over there.
goo.
Well, no,
it's goo, John. It's
No,
different.
there are pools of I think it's like a nitrogen-based compound that form like lakes and rivers underwater on the floor.
Well, I mean,
So those things do exist.
yeah, but can electric particles jump from one to the other in them? Okay, so this upcoming section right here, I'm going to do it the legitimate way, but what you really should do is just wait to get to the cruise bubble and then whack him with
Hit
that
him from
later.
afar.
later. Because all the game cares about is that the guy on top of that box is dead. They don't care how you kill him. So you can hit him with the cruise bubble, you can glitch out the game, jump out of bounds, and whack him with your normal attack. Or you can do the giant reflector puzzle with the towers here, which I never figured out how to do as a kid because I'm bad at video games and have the attention span of a gnat. But, you know.
it's interesting that they didn't program it so that he could only be killed by the puzzle.
So, the programming to this game is really, really interesting. A lot of and we know a lot about the way different stuff is programmed because the speedrunning community is impressively dedicated to this game. it's there's a lot of work put into getting the fastest time in this, but because of that, there's a lot of different information out there about how stuff is handled. Like, for example, some bosses in this game have a hidden trigger outside of the bounds to instantly end the fight, and that was used for testing the ending cutscene, and they just left the trigger in there. But some other bosses don't, and it's basically what they found out during development. Like, what we found out about the development of this game, I should say, is that the director and producer were pretty lax about letting people who were in charge of specific areas do things the way they wanted to do it. So if one guy handled the boss fights that he had to make one way, and the other guy who did other boss fights did it his way, and that's why the coding between the two are so different. So it's really, really interesting the way they did that, basically.
I think the
is.
mindset was that kids are never going to figure this shit out.
Yeah, basically. Basically. It also, sometimes there's just, it's the path of least resistance, It's like, what's easier to code and give you spatula when the enemy is defeated, or win the puzzle when the enemy is defeated through the specific light beam. The first one's probably easier to code, and if it doesn't really matter, then they probably just went with that first one.
Yeah, I suppose. It's interesting the way games around this time and earlier were programmed, though, because we didn't have, excuse me, we didn't have quite so many third-party game engines running the show
Yeah, this
as we
game.
do today.
I think this game was made on Renderware, which I believe was a third-party engine, but there aren't really as many of them. There definitely weren't as many of them as there were back now.
As many commonly used ones, I mean.
Yeah, and they definitely weren't as refined as you see them today now either. You know, so like I believe at this point the Unreal Engine might have. I don't even know if anybody was really using that at the moment or anything like that. But because that's the one I hear about the most often now is either Unreal or Unity is the other one.
Unreal, Unity, yeah.
Yeah, those are the probably the two.
And if it's not one of those, it's probably some in-house engine like Capcom uses right now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a tech person, so I don't really know what one engine can do over the other specifically. Like, that's just not my. I don't find that kind of stuff interesting in terms of game development. I more find the fun tricks that they use to get certain things to work interesting.
I think they do have like some common characteristics that crop up in games made with them, like just the way things are rendered out and all. And how that factors into whether an engine is good for a particular kind of art style.
Okay.
The other thing might be ease of use.
Yeah,
That too.
That's also a thing, yeah. But yeah, Goo Lagoon, I've always liked this level, but when I went, as a kid I should say, but when I went back to replay this one, it wasn't really one of my favorites, mostly just because, well, I should say, just going from level to level is fine. I enjoyed that a lot. But a lot of the extra missions I find really annoying. Like, we already did most of the connecting the towers minigame, but there's also the saving all the kids mission, which is really annoying.
Is it always kids?
Yeah, because it's a... wait, oh yeah, I remember. They're on the balloons, and Miss Puff wants them down because they'll hurt themselves, even though they're having a good time. You can save the kids by dropping them into the ocean, and they never come back out. But don't worry, they're off the balloons, so it's safer.
Would somebody please think of the children?
Nah.
Oh man, that frame drop saved your life, Ted.
Are you sure about that?
Oh, you made it.
I mean, I guess. That poor guy. Oh yeah, sometimes the characters will just say random stuff. Although they often will say the same things over and over, and then you'll get really tired of hearing those quotes. But I'm not bitter.
Yeah, thanks, Scout Force.
It's like these platforms were built for me.
Patrick, what? I mean, I don't think it ever gets that bad at any point, but it...
Bounce pad.
You see, I was going to do a Sandy, but I don't think I could do a Sandy impression.
You can save the children by bubble bashing each of the balloons.
So I know Mrs. Puff is kind of a wreck.
Yeah.
But, like, does she always shake that constantly in the show?
No, not really, because that's harder to animate for a 2D thing, because you have to draw the different frames over and over again. But she was that much of a wreck in the show, for sure. Like,
well, so
And
with
then
SpongeBob anyway, yeah.
And for some reason, in her house, there's a picture of her standing in her doorway from when she entered the house. Which is a detail I will never forget because I found it so weird when I first saw it.
I don't know if they ever explain what happened to Mr. Puff.
Oh, he became a light, remember?
Oh, yeah, they do explain.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Oh, jeez.
He got caught and made into a light.
Oh. Oh.
Whatever happened to Mr. Puff? She doesn't like to talk about it.
Oh, yeah, that was the episode where her and Mr. Krabs fell in love. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fucked up.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. I've been part of the Sonic fan base, so interspecies relationships is just, I'm over it. Like, okay.
I think he's talking about the fact that they went there that the husband is dead.
Yeah, Mr. Puff is he just fucking died.
Well, I mean, what else are they
going
to do? Talk about the traumatic impact that their divorce had on them? Like, if you've looked, have you looked up the psychological stuff of statistics about divorce? Because there are people, there's studies that show that going through a divorce can afflict more mental stress on someone than going to prison. I'm not joking. That
Oh man, I'm like secretly paying attention to like all the best out of context shit for this commentary. And again, what is this part 6, Battle for Bikini Bottom? Have you ever looked at the mental repercussions of divorce?
no, but dude, if you get it worse than prison, like I mean, like that's still like that blew my mind when I was taking my psych classes, and yeah, that poor kid, he's dead.
Yeah, he's fine. He's just having time of his life.
Are you sure about that? He looks
Yeah.
he looks very afraid.
And if he wants to get out, just look for one of the many safety hooks.
Oh yes,
Yeah,
because
we
those
forgot-
aren't
we-
dangerous. No.
We forgot to install those.
Come on, SpongeBob. Do you think this looks dangerous?
Rescued.
Yeah. Let
quotes,
me
yeah.
edit in a couple of quotation marks over that one. There we go. All right, that's better.
Hero.
Now I have to remember to edit in quotation marks. Crap.
There's a golden
You won't.
Okay, you know what? Screw you, John. All right.
Now I'll do it just to spite
Now
you.
I'll do
Yeah,
it
uh,
just
n-
to spite you.
How sweet it worked.
Well, now he's not going to.
Maybe I'll only put it in the
One
in
time.
the title, on the title screen. Not the title screen, the
The
video,
part
the video
title.
title. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, this level, you know, I guess I just like the beach aesthetic. I've always been a summer kind of person, so you know.
It was kind of around this point though, where one of my relatively minor complaints that I had for my video of it was that the game at points can look a little washed out.
So
Not as colorful as I thought it would be for a Nickelodeon.
So, this is actually something where I really recommend looking up footage of the Xbox version, because there's a lot more detail, and the colors are a lot brighter on Xbox than there are in GameCube. It was like looking at a different game when I looked up the footage of
Really?
it, because apparently the game was developed for Xbox first, and then ported down, and then adjusted for GameCube and PS2
Huh, that's interesting.
after. I don't think that's how it usually went for these kinds of things. Like, I don't think a lot of. I mean, I'm talking.
What game should we put our children's licensed game on? The console meant for teenage first-person shooters.
Well, no, I think the big thing about it is that a lot of games are made on computers.
No, I know. I'm just making a joke.
Well, I think
Well,
every
no,
game
I was
is made
talking
on
more
a
with Ted,
computer
yeah.
of some sort.
Yeah, but I think Xbox used a lot of things that were just Microsoft patent, and it was basically a PC of the time, and it was easiest to port to that console while keeping everything relatively intact. Because the thing, a big thing about that generation was that especially for like the PS2, is that you're gonna have to maybe cut around a few corners just so that we can get this game to work on this different architecture.
Yeah. So they did do so. Actually, speaking of the PC, if you ever want a good laugh, look up the PC version of Battle for Bikini Bottom. It's not a port of this game. It's its own separate game, and it's trash. So
What?
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know what.
Yeah, that's about around that time. Games marketed for PC were generally considerably weaker than their console counterparts because they weren't being designed for people with necessarily good graphics hardware.
Yeah, it's from what I see, I barely remember it, but it's much more similar to, I think, like a minigame collection, if I remember correctly.
One of my favorite comparisons is the Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban console release versus the PC version. They both basically advertised themselves the same way and had a lot of the same features on paper, but the way they play is completely different. They're also two completely different games, but like one opens up, the PS2 GameCube Xbox version opens up on this highly cinematic train sequence with the Dementor attacking and all that. And then the PC version has the same sequence, except with 90% of the graphics gone.
I mean,
And
it's just so odd to me though because like you expect because they made a Game Boy Advance port
Dope.
of this game and also the Harry Potter games. Now that I think about it, they made a Game Boy Advance port of basically every licensed game that they were making for the consoles, and of course you're gonna expect the portable version to be a completely different game. But you'd think that the
Almost always worse, too.
yeah, well, sometimes they were okay. Like I don't remember the Harry Potter GBA game being that bad. You know.
well, Order of the Phoenix was a special kind of disaster, but the Prisoner of Azkaban game, if I remember right, was a straight-up turn-based RPG.
On Game Boy Advance? Really?
Yeah.
Wow. The Harry Potter and the Casting Ultima. All right. That's... You know what? That actually sounds like it could be okay. Like it could be fun.
It was okay-ish, if I remember right.
Yeah. So, basically, the point I was trying to get at was... I can understand, if you're making it for the Game Boy, you're going to have to make a different game. But... you could at least try to make the same game for the PC.
The thing about the PC version, though, is that, the console versions were kind of Zelda-likes, right? You put spells on certain buttons like you would tools in a Zelda game, and you adventure gamed around that way. The PC versions of the Harry Potter games, up until Prisoner of Azkaban, were games where you aimed your wand with your mouse and cast spells on specific context-sensitive objects throughout the environments to navigate the game.
Oh, so they made it a point-and-click kind of adventure game.
Ish, sort of. That's not the best way to describe it, but it's kind of like they had a certain way of designing the PC games, and it's interesting. In some ways, better designed than the console games. Like, the areas, although the graphics were worse, were generally more open, and it's... I'll probably do both games at some point for the channel, and we'll see then. We've already gone over part quite a bit. I'm sorry.
It's fine.